Hey everyone, welcome back to Steve's View. Today we're diving into one of the most consequential, and honestly, one of the strangest, political stories we've seen in months. A story that sits at the intersection of diplomacy, espionage, domestic politics, and the future of the war in Ukraine. A story that raises a question that no one in Washington wants to answer out loud. Who leaked a private phone call between a U.S. envoy and Vladimir Putin's top foreign policy advisor? And why? Because depending on who leaked it, the implications are very, very different. Was it Russia trying to embarrass the U.S.? Was it Ukraine trying to sabotage a peace plan it didn't like? Did European intelligence get involved? Or, and this is the option no one wants to talk about, was it someone from inside the U.S. government trying to blow up Donald Trump's peace initiative from within? And if that's the case, we're looking at a level of internal sabotage that should terrify anyone who cares about how foreign policy is actually made in this country. So today, we're going to break down exactly what happened, why this leak matters, what it tells us about the state of the Ukraine war negotiations, and why this small 5-minute phone call has detonated a much bigger political and diplomatic crisis. And I'll tell you up front, my conclusion is that the most likely leaker is someone inside the United States government, from the faction opposed to both Wetkov and Trump's 28-point peace plan. Their goal was to kill the plan before it ever reached the signing table. And yes, it's probably working, but the fallout doesn't stop there. This leak is going to damage trust between the US, Ukraine, and Russia. It's going to complicate negotiations. It's going to raise the political temperature in Washington even further. Yet despite all that, it won't stop the talks entirely. It's just going to make everything harder. And at the very end, I'm going to talk about something no one in mainstream media wants to admit. The 28-point peace plan itself has major structural problems. Serious ones. Problems that were obvious long before this leak happened. So let's get into it, and let's start with what actually happened. On November 25th, Bloomberg dropped a bombshell. They published a recording, a full 5-minute WhatsApp call between Richard Wetkov, the U.S. Special Envoy appointed by President Trump, Yuri Ushakov, Vladimir Putin's senior foreign policy advisor, and one of the most influential figures in the Kremlin. This call didn't happen last week. It didn't happen yesterday. It happened over a month earlier, on October 14th. Which means someone sat on this recording for weeks. Someone waited for the right moment. Someone chose the timing very, very deliberately. According to Bloomberg, and confirmed later by Ushakov himself, here's what Wetkov said during the call. He told the Kremlin exactly what it needed to do to make Donald Trump more eager to sign a peace deal. And he wasn't subtle about it. He said Putin should praise Trump's success in achieving a temporary ceasefire in the Middle East, because Trump likes to hear positive things about himself. He also said that if Russia took a more optimistic tone about peace, it would give him space to negotiate. And here's the line that set off a political earthquake. I know what it's going to take to get peace. Donetsk going to Russia and some kind of land swap elsewhere. That one sentence poured gasoline on a fire that was already burning. Because it hinted at something people were only whispering about, that the controversial 28-point peace plan, the one handed to Ukraine earlier, might have included terms allowing Russia to keep some of the territory it seized. Now, do we know for sure that Wetkov's comment reflects official U.S. policy? No, we don't. But we do know this. The moment that line went public, politicians across Europe and Ukraine started asking, is the U.S. negotiating a peace deal behind our backs, and is that deal tilted toward Moscow? Ushakov, for his part, confirmed the recording was real, and he also said the leak was unacceptable, calling it hybrid warfare designed to disrupt the negotiations. Which immediately raises the question, who would want to disrupt the negotiations? And that's where the story gets interesting. When you strip away the noise, there are really only 4 plausible categories of leakers. Let's go through each of them, and I'll tell you which one I think is by far the most likely. Possibility number 1. WhatsApp. Meta leaked it. Let's get this one out of the way quickly. This isn't just unlikely, it's basically impossible. If WhatsApp leaked a private call between a US envoy and Putin's top advisor, that would mean Meta would face global lawsuits, it would lose user trust overnight, it would face investigations from every Western government, and the brand would be permanently destroyed. Companies don't commit suicide to leak one phone call, so we're crossing this one off the list. Possibility number 2. Random hackers intercepted it. Again, extremely unlikely. WhatsApp calls are end-to-end encrypted. There are billions of calls every day. The odds of a random hacker accidentally intercepting the only one between the US envoy and Putin's advisor are basically 0. And even if they did, how would they recognize the voices? How would they know it was important? How would they get to Bloomberg? No, this isn't a random hack. Possibility number 3. Ukraine or European intelligence leaked it. Okay, now we're in more plausible territory. There is a theory, even repeated by a CIA veteran, that Ukrainian or European services leaked the call to weaken Wetkov and block any plan that would force Ukraine into territorial concessions. Motivation? Sure, they definitely have one. Ukraine doesn't want pressure to accept a deal involving land swaps. Europeans feel excluded from US, involving Russian negotiations. Both groups distrust Trump's instincts on Russia, and both would gain leverage by blowing up the talks. But here's the problem. They lack capability. To leak this call, they would need the original recording or direct access to the devices of one of the 2 participants or NSA-level interception tools. Ukraine doesn't have that level of access to US-Russia communications. Neither do most European services. Could they have been handed the recording? Possibly, but that means the real leaker still came from inside one of the 2 governments. So this theory might explain distribution, but not acquisition, which brings us to the real candidates. Possibility number 4. Someone inside the US or inside Russia leaked it. Now we're talking, because the only people who definitely had the recording are Wetkov, Ushakov, their internal teams, their governments, their intelligence services. Both Washington and Moscow have factions that hate the idea of compromise. Both have hardliners who want to sabotage negotiations. Both have people who think the 28-point plan is too generous to the other side. But here's the key difference. In Russia, leaks of this type are rare. They require Kremlin clearance, or at least tolerance. And Russia doesn't benefit from making itself look like it's colluding with Trump's team to manipulate negotiations. So while a Russian leak isn't impossible, it's not the best fit. Which brings us to the most uncomfortable and most compelling explanation. When you put together motivation, capability, and risk tolerance, one option stands above the rest. The leak most likely came from inside the American government, from a faction opposed to Wetkov, opposed to Trump's peace plan, and opposed to any negotiation that looks too friendly toward Russia. Let me walk you through why this conclusion makes the most sense. 1. Motivation. They wanted to kill the 28-point plan inside Washington, especially inside the State Department, Pentagon, and Intel community. There are powerful groups that fundamentally oppose territorial concessions to Russia. Many of them believe any deal letting Russia keep land equals rewarding aggression. Trump's team is too willing to negotiate directly with Moscow. The 28-point plan is a deal made over Ukraine's head. Wetkov is not aligned with the traditional national security establishment. If you're someone who thinks the plan is dangerous, blowing up the negotiators is the quickest way to stop it, and that's exactly what this leak did, within 24 hours of the recording going public. Democrats demanded investigations. European leaders expressed outrage. Ukraine accused Wetkov of being too pro-Russia. Media narratives turned hostile. The peace plan became politically toxic. Mission accomplished for whoever wanted to kill the plan. 2. Capability. U.S. agencies absolutely have access. Let's be blunt. If the U.S. government wants a recording, the U.S. government can get the recording. NSA can access encrypted calls. State Department devices are monitored. Diplomatic communications pass through government servers. Internal transcripts are often made. U.S. special envoys operate within bureaucratic structures. It is far easier for someone in D.C. to leak the call than someone in Kyiv or Brussels. 3. Risk tolerance. Low risk, high reward. The leaker knew Bloomberg would protect their identity. It would be nearly impossible to trace. Politically, it would be framed as journalism. They could hide behind national security secrecy. Leaking from inside the U.S. was safer than any foreign option. So yes, the most rational conclusion is this. The leak came from inside the American government, from people who wanted to sabotage the peace plan before it gained momentum. And if you understand how Washington works, this shouldn't surprise you. The most dangerous enemy of any policy is not a foreign government. It's the part of your own government that doesn't want that policy to succeed. The leakers' objectives were likely: 1. Stop the 28-point peace plan from moving forward by painting it as pro-Russia, illegitimate, and politically toxic. 2. Undermine Wetkov personally by portraying him as either naive or compromised. 3. Damage Trump's political credibility by suggesting his envoy was coordinating with the Kremlin. 4. Force the U.S. back toward a harder, more traditional security posture, meaning no concessions, no land swaps, no diplomatic shortcuts. 5. Reassert institutional control over the peace process. In other words, foreign policy is our turf, not Trump's. And the leak has already achieved at least 3 of these objectives. Now we get to the part people aren't fully acknowledging yet, because this leak isn't just a political embarrassment. It has real consequences for real negotiations affecting real wars. Let's break them down. 1. It damages trust between everyone. U.S.-Ukraine trust damaged. Ukraine now wonders if the U.S. is negotiating behind its back. U.S.-Russia trust damaged. Moscow now wonders if Washington can even control its own internal factions. U.S.-Europe trust damaged. Europe is upset it's being excluded from negotiations. This kind of leak makes everyone nervous. And for peace deals, trust is the currency. Once it's gone, everything slows down. It complicates, but does not stop, negotiations. Despite the chaos, none of the parties can afford to walk away. Ukraine needs a durable framework. Russia needs sanctions relief. Europe wants stability. Trump wants a foreign policy success. The world wants the war off the front page. So the talks will continue, but with more suspicion, more bureaucracy, more back-channeling, and more political friction. It weakens the 28-point peace plan. This is important. The plan was already controversial. The leak makes it radioactive. Even if it survives, it won't survive unchanged. Congress will push amendments. Ukraine will demand revisions. Russia will distrust U.S. negotiators. Europe will insist on being included. The plan might still exist on paper, but it no longer exists in the form it was originally written. Next is the part nobody in the mainstream press wants to talk about. Because the truth is, the 28-point plan had serious structural flaws from the beginning, long before the leak. And to understand why, let's compare it to something else Washington worked on recently: the Gaza ceasefire proposal. Now, whenever you think about Gaza, that plan had one thing going for it. It accounted for the actual power dynamics on the ground. Israel had overwhelming force. Hamas was strategically cornered, and the plan gave Hamas something, an exit path, but not more than their position warranted. It reflected reality. The Ukraine plan did not. Here's why. Problem number 1. It didn't reflect Ukraine's actual military situation. Ukraine is not Hamas. Ukraine is not defeated. Ukraine is not in a bunker underground with no leverage. Even today, Ukraine still strikes Russian energy infrastructure. Ukraine still hits Russian ammo depots. Ukraine still has control of Western support pipelines. Ukraine still holds key defensive positions. Russia has not achieved its strategic goals. For any plan to work, it must reflect the reality that Ukraine retains significant capability. The 28-point plan didn't fully account for that. Problem number 2. It underestimated Ukrainian political constraints. No Ukrainian president, not Zelensky, not any successor, can walk back into Kyiv and say, by the way, we agreed to give up territory. It would end their career. It would divide the country. It would destabilize the government. Any peace plan that doesn't acknowledge this basic political reality is not a viable plan. Problem number 3. It overestimated Russia's willingness to compromise. Russia is not signaling any readiness to withdraw from occupied territories. On the contrary, they reaffirmed, again, that they would not give up land they already control. A plan built on assumptions Russia rejects cannot work unless Moscow sees overwhelming strategic pressure. And right now, they don't. Problem number 4. It didn't incorporate Ukrainian leverage properly. Ukraine still has long-range strike capabilities that affect Russia's energy grid and other strategic assets. These tools give Ukraine bargaining power. The 28-point plan did not capitalize on that leverage. Problem number 5. It tried to compress too much into one package. The Middle East plan worked because it was incremental. The Ukraine plan tried to solve borders, prisoners, sanctions, security guarantees, reconstruction, neutrality, oversight, monitoring, and de-escalation, all in one document. That's not how major wars end. They end in stages. So that's where we are. A 5-minute phone call has exposed fault lines running through Washington, Moscow, Kyiv, and Brussels. And it's shown us something uncomfortable. America's biggest diplomatic battles aren't always fought overseas. Sometimes they're fought inside our own institutions. And when factions inside the U.S. government start leaking diplomatic calls to sabotage negotiations, we're not just dealing with a foreign policy crisis. We're dealing with a governance crisis. The talks will go on, but after this leak, they'll go on with less trust, more suspicion, and even higher stakes. If you found this breakdown helpful, share it, like it, and drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the leak came from inside the U.S. government? Do you think the 28-point plan was doomed from the start? I'm curious how you see it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.